Well, Norman Osborn may have died, but his legacy, his power, will live on. And this time it shall be shaped by a man who knows how to use power. The Green Goblin is no more, but in his place now stands the Hobgoblin. Quote, the Hobgoblin. Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, Issue 238, Shadows of Evil's Past. Peter Parker is joining his Aunt May and Nathan Lubinsky at the Tax Authority of New York in order to get Aunt May's license to operate a special status landlady for her boarding house for the elderly from her home. Peter, musings about it being the home where Spider-Man grew up, causes him to think back to his youth growing up in that home with Aunt May and his Uncle Ben. From there, he recalls how he got his spider's powers and the death of Uncle Ben, something Peter still blames himself over because he could have caught the crook responsible days earlier. Peter then thinks how great Nathan Lubinsky has been for his aunt, as he had invested his own savings to help May get her home off the ground. With all the paperwork filed away, the trio decides to go on out and celebrate. Out on the street, Peter's spider sense begins to go off and he narrowly avoids a car speeding out of an alleyway. Soon a police car pulls up and asks if they are okay and to explain that the speeding car is involved in a bank robbery. Furious that his Aunt May and her fiance almost got hurt, Peter tells them that he needs to go and rushes off. Peter quickly changes to Spider-Man and hitches a ride on the pursuing police car. Needing the money, he webs his camera onto the flashers on the police car to snap action photos for the Daily Bugle. Spider-Man then leaps across to the evading car and smashes his way inside. This forces the crooks to crash their car. However, one of them, George Hill, is thrown clear from the car and he tries to escape. Spider-Man follows after him but is briefly disoriented when George tosses a smoke bomb at him. This doesn't stop Spider-Man from spotting his escape down a manhole cover. Spider-Man follows after him into the sewers. Fearing capture, George wonders what to do next when he suddenly leans on a secret door. Finding the air inside fresher than the sewers, George goes inside, losing Spider-Man. The wall crawler returns to the surface empty-handed and follows up with the police before heading off, grabbing his camera along the way. Unknown to Spider-Man, he was not far from an Osborn manufacturing building. While below the surface, George explores the strange tunnel that he discovered and is shocked when he leads him to the secret room containing the equipment of the Green Goblin. Meanwhile, Aunt May and Nathan return home, is disappointed that there are no messages for her upon her arrival. When she enters the house, the phone begins to ring. May answers it, hoping that it is her nephew Peter, and turns out to be her long-term friend Anna Watson, who has been living in Florida. Anna congratulates May on starting her boarding house and tells her that Mary Jane has been staying with her for a while. At that very moment, Peter Parker has returned to his apartment and tries to call Aunt May, but discovers the line is busy. With his new photos developed, he takes them to the Daily Bugle. There, Joe Robinson is impressed with Peter's photos, telling the young photographer that they are his best yet. Peter tries to call Aunt May again, but the line is still busy. When Joe tells the copy boy to take the pictures to be printed, the copy boy mentions the chase ended at the Osborn facility. This causes Peter to recollect his old nemesis, Norman Osborn, the original Green Goblin, and how he had learned Peter's secret identity. As he thinks about how Osborn was responsible for the death of Gwen Stacy, his thoughts are interrupted by the very generous check for the photo. Joe then offers to give Peter a ride back out to Forest Hills to see his aunt. At that moment, George Hill takes a mysterious man to the Green Goblin's underground hideout. The man is very interested to find the Goblin's old equipment and journals and tells George to load it all up in his van. Shortly thereafter, Joe Robinson and Peter are on their way to Forest Hills. As Joe tells Peter not to be a stranger as he focuses more and more on his studies, they hear a radio report about a fire that has broken out at the Osborn manufacturing plant. There, Peter discovers that Lance Banham beat him to the fire to take photos. When Joe questions the firemen on the scene about the source of fire, they say it started in a room that was not on any of the blueprints. With the fire put out, Peter asks to go inside and check it out. Granted access, as Peter looks at the secret room and recognizes it as one of the places where the Green Goblin stashed his equipment. Peter worries that he knows who might have looted the room. Joe then gets a call from Aunt May for Peter and tells her that he will meet her for dinner, and tells Joe that he's going to walk the rest of the way. As he leaves, Peter worries that the crook he chased into the sewers was the one who found the Goblin's old lair. Later that evening in the South Bronx, George Hill has finished emptying out the equipment from the van for his employer. The mystery man tells George to dispose of the van, but he drives away. His employer sets it to explode, killing George. Inside his home, the man has dyed the Green Goblin costume to suit his needs, trying out the equipment, and is impressed by Norman Osborn's inventive genius. With a new mask molded, the man dresses himself up in his new costume and tends to use his newfound power to continue where Norman Osborn left off. This incendiary bomb, for instance, it hardly makes a sound when it ignites, yet it releases enough heat to melt through a 3-inch thick sheet of steel, and the gloves interwoven with microcircuitry which can channel power burst of several thousand volts. Remarkable. But the thing which fascinates me the most is the jet glider. It's so swift, maneuverable, and quiet. It controls and can be mastered in seconds. This must surely represent a breakthrough of the science of flight. This proves Osborn was insane. He could have made more money by marketing such a device than he ever could have made in crime. Of course, in keeping this to himself, he becomes the only one in the world that possesses such a wondrous device. The only one, yes. The freedom, the power that gives one, it's exhilarating. What a stroke of luck that all this fell in my lap, and the plastex in the mold should be fully set by now. Excellent. My new face, it still evokes the madness of the Goblin, and the slight changes I made in the mold should produce a more fearsome countenance, and the dyes appear to have fully dried in the costumes that I altered yesterday. Yes, the fit is perfect. It's marvelous. I feel like a new man in this outfit. No, not new, different. It's easy to see how Osborn became so warped by his second identity. The compulsion to escape the restraints of society is something I can well understand. The trick is to control that compulsion and not let it control you. Undoubtedly, the lack of control was the cause of Osborn's downfall. His forays into the world of crime, his battles with Spider-Man must have proven too much for his unbalanced mind to handle. Well, Norman Osborn may have died, but his legacy, his power will live on, and this time it shall be shaped by a man who knows how to use power. The Green Goblin is no more, but now in his place now stands the Hobgoblin. Notes: there are many references to Aunt May starting a boarding house for the elderly. That happened in Marvel Team Up 124. Hearing about Osborn manufacturing plant causes Peter to recall how his old foe for the Green Goblin learned his secret identity, Amazing Spider-Man 39, and how the Goblin responsible for the death of Gwen Stacy, Amazing Spider-Man 121. Everyone believes that Norman Osborn is dead after his apparent demise in Amazing Spider-Man 122. However, as revealed in Osborn Journals #1, Norman survived. He will resurface in Amazing Spider-Man 412. The true identity of the Hobgoblin is not revealed until Spider-Man Hobgoblin Lives #3. Next issue, Amazing Spider-Man Volume 1, issue 239. Now strikes the Hobgoblin.